And he's also worked at PwC, Rialto Partners, Ernst & Young, E&Y, and is one of these leading-edge mobility pioneers that we're so grateful that they would come and share their knowledge. And Lakshmi, Sampath, are you here? Come on up. Lakshmi, thank you. Woo! Really enjoyed your comments in the last panel. That was awesome. Sachindra, Hande. Yeah. Welcome. All right. So Sachindra is the Deputy General Manager, COE Global Mobility at Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy here in Bangalore. It's an individual with all variety of experience over 19 years, compensation, mobility, resource management, recruitment, transition, transformation. That's what we're talking about today. And our own Rajesh. Where are you, Rajesh? Puttaswamaiah, come on up. Rajesh. Rajesh, yeah, where are you? Rajesh. I know he's right out there probably having a good chat. Hey, there he is. Come on up. Rajesh is General Counsel and Vice President, RelayZen. RelayZen operates from Whitefield. Rajesh is a longtime immigration and mobility professional. I know previously PwC and elsewhere. Legal expertise, right? Because he's an attorney as well as mobility professional, and his mission is to enable seamless and compliant mobility for the global talent population, giving the best customer service, operational excellence, and helping to mitigate risk in the companies with the software solutions. Thanks, Rajesh. He's also, by the way, a passionate citizen scientist and trustee of a nonprofit organization you may not have known. And guess what they protect? They promote and protect and provide education on the conservation of bats in India. Yeah, he's like Batman. Yeah, he's like our very own Batman. And Shub is his Robin over there. Shub, right? Robin, Batman, okay? And my name, Lipman. Try to figure that out, right? Anyway, our panel is here. Let's talk transformation, shaping mobility strategies. Thank you, panel.
Thanks, Jake. I'm a little nervous. I've been hearing a lot of feedback about other sessions, and I think Praveen really has set the bar high for me. I'll try my best to moderate this session, but I'm not sure. I'm sure that I'll not be able to match up with his skills. But let's try and do the best. I mean, I have excellent panel here. All veterans in the industry. I've known them for quite some years, and have been talking to them for many years. I'm sure they'll be able to kind of enlighten you guys. The first question is, in mobility, we have multiple types of structures, and what do you think is the biggest challenge or different types of similar structures that an organization would have? And what do you think with the positives and negatives of probably each of those structures?
It's, there is no one size which fits all. Because based on the sector which we are working in, I've worked on the IT sector, I've worked on the service sector, which had different sectors followed. I was working with different kind of clients. They were in different sectors altogether. Then now I am into a manufacturing industry, which has a different kind of assignment requirement altogether. So if it was in the earlier days when the IT was booming, they were more looking at the short terms or a very long-term assignment, but then they changed into ensuring that they can reduce the cost and bring in more of one-way transfers. But that doesn't work for a manufacturing industry because sometimes we need people just for 3 months, come back, and then go back again. So short terms probably fits for some bit of manufacturing industry. IT, more of the permanent transfers, and it's mixed for generally different other sectors. So based on the sectors what you're working in, you might need to flex around based on the requirement itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Sachin. So Rajesh, yes, he made a right point saying there is no one size that fits everyone. But one thing which I'm very confident in saying is that there is no right, wrong, but each organization will have policies. In fact, instead of calling them policies, I would prefer to call them as guidelines because we have exceptions. See, if you say policy, you cannot make exceptions, principally, right? So we have different guidelines, traditional conservative guidelines, I would say long-term assignments, short-term assignments, etc. But one buzzword that I keep hearing is virtual assignments. Right, virtual assignments is picking up. So we do have different assignment structures with the bank, and we have commuter arrangements, we have secondment arrangements. It's not just about people moving from one country to another. We currently see some talent enabler programs where people are asked to move within the same function from, say, Chennai to Bangalore. So those are even being facilitated as secondment arrangements with limited benefits. So I think these are some of the assignment structures that we have. And challenges, if you ask me, every assignment program, you will have challenges. How you navigate through those challenges with the experiences that you have all this while is what matters. And virtual assignments is slowly picking up. And post-COVID, I think prior to COVID, we were well ahead of the program and we had a framework in place. But during COVID, what we did is we were able to facilitate the virtual assignments, especially where people got stuck in home country or multiple countries where they were not able to perform the assignments in the assignment locations. So I think virtual assignment is something that's picking up, and we are seeing a lot of challenges, especially around the tax and compliance area. So that is one thing that we are marching towards, and maybe we are just trying to pilot in some of the markets and have a guideline in place for virtual assignments.
Interesting. Ravi, any thoughts on your side?
Assignment structures per se are, from how I see it, having been a consultant who's probably helped companies put together solutions, to being a part of an organization that wants to make or fit things into a structure. I've seen both sides. What I feel is structures are nothing but most commonly used ways to mitigate risks, to make sure that it is done compliantly, to make sure you are able to, say, tick all the boxes. But they're not always limited to the written policies, going back to her point. It's not one type of structure that fits an organization, going back to your point. It is a lot about solving for a situation as and when they come up. There are some that are very repeatable. The ones that we call long-term assignments, the ones that we call permanent transfers are very repeatable because of how often those instances come up. But structuring per se is solutioning to a specific situation and could go beyond policy. So I see assignment structures as a very flexible kind of advisory that happens within mobility. And it is very much subject to the particular situation.
Got it. So, Lakshmi, you mentioned about virtual assignments, virtual work or probably virtual assignment. Do you guys see any trend in terms of either increase in the virtual assignments post-COVID or a decrease? Maybe it spiked up, but have you started noticing like coming down in the last 6 months to 1 year? Or do you think the trend is kind of still continue to increase?
See, who would want to take a huge cost on an assignment? No business would love to take cost on assignments, right? Unless and until you really want someone to be in the country to perform the job. I think like you mentioned, short-term assignments, like 20% of the assignments are only long-term assignments today. 80% of the assignments, at least in the bank, I can commend most of them are short-term assignments. And these short-term assignments vary between 3 to 12 months. And predominantly people who travel on 3 months assignment, like for a paternity, someone who wants to cover maternity, paternity, or for a quick fix. Yeah. I think business is now wanting to explore more on virtual assignments where there is business efficiency in terms of cost. And I would say this has increased the D&I percentage of the bank. Okay. The way that I see this is because there are some women talents who are not able to contribute to the assignments because of various family challenges. And now, if you give them an option to sit in the home country and give them all the benefits or a limited benefit that you call yourself, so they're able to contribute, right? So, yes, to your answer, business is wanting to explore more around the virtual assignments. Of course, this will have its own demerits. There are young talents who wants to physically be in the country and enjoy the culture, and that might have a hit. And one other area that we have to be very cautious is around the tax and compliance, like I mentioned earlier. So you do not know what are some of the unforeseen tax liabilities that you might invite. Exactly. So we are taking some efforts in trying to understand from employment tax experts. But if you ask me what are the challenges, like 30% of them, we are placing on a case-to-case basis, and largely on short-term assignments.
Pre-COVID, I think virtual assignments or remote work were, if I can classify it, more luxury. During COVID, more necessity. Right now, I think it's become an expectation. A lot of companies earlier would have a different stance when it was considered probably luxury, a different stance when it was more necessity, that you found ways to make it happen. And now that it's become an expectation and a lot of companies offering similar benefits, it's also become a tool for talent attraction and retention. So in a state where it's more of an expectation and companies have realized how much needs to go in terms of policy making and compliance management for virtual assignments to be risk-free, if they can ever be risk-free. There must be a lot of consultants saying, oh no, that's not possible. But for that to happen, I think there's a lot more that needs to go in. There is also the element of necessity that's coming in from a perspective of, say, talent shortages in different parts of the world. And somehow, remote work or virtual assignments are an easy answer to talent shortages. Saying, if you're able to have a policy that allows you to hire across the globe, you can tap into talent much more easily. So it's a cross-section right now where probably talent is invested, employee attraction, retention, that is invested into it. There is mobility that's invested into it from a risk and making it happen standpoint. So it's probably the right time where a lot of companies are starting to put together policies and strategies around it. We'll see more. At least talking about Maersk, we already have something that addresses, say, a talent issue with a remote work perspective. So we are able to hire people permanently in other countries with elaborate assessments and approvals and all of that being put in place. But it's something that's more real than simply a post-pandemic expectation, I would say.
Got it. So virtual assessments, I'm not sure how many companies do really have a virtual assessment policy or support. Is this restricted to more of a Indian-based company or MNCs? I just want to know from the audience, like, does your company allow virtual assessments, or do you think that's kind of picking up as what Ravi says, more of a necessity now than a use? Can I have a raise of hands, like how many companies support virtual assessments? Okay, very few. So I think probably it's more of an industry agnostic, not necessarily common with all the industries. Okay, that's a good one. Any thought from your side, Sachin?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically on the PE risk, which is a lot of emphasis which we need to have. Because if we don't have a entity in place, and if you're bringing in people, there is a lot of work which we need to do from a corporate tax perspective. So we tend to avoid as much as possible, but based on the work which they're doing, I mean, if it is more of a corporate-related work like finance, HR, and those kind of stuff, and we need good numbers in there, and if it makes sense to have the entity in place or come up with a different option, then we go for it. Otherwise, it's really a no-go at many cases.
Got it. Another question more on the policy and benefits that offer. So does the policy offer benefits based on seniority of a person, or do your organization have a kind of standard structure? Let's say someone with 20, 25 years experience at a leadership level, do you have different benefits to them versus say probably some fresher or a middle management level, or do you tend to kind of keep it uniform?
Flat benefits. Flat benefits we offer, but we make sure that that fits the seniority as well. Of course, yes, to your point. But definitely we don't we don't cut down the benefits for juniors, because we have to be very consistent, and we are very particular about fair pay charters, consistently delivering the benefits across the bank. So it's so easy for someone to go and, do some small talks and say, like, you got it, I didn't get it. So you're not actually building a great reputation for the company, right? Especially when there are newcomers. So I think we work around flat benefits. Of course, here's CEOs and very senior people, when they move, we make sure that we work between core and flex. Okay. So how much, the intent is not to make anyone rich, right? So the intent is to just deliver to the need, and how you trade off between core and flex.
Okay, thank you. Sachin.
Yes, I mean, we might have some benefits which will be exceptions. Basically, we don't put it on the policies, but obviously based on the level of work which they're doing, the requirement in terms of people to be in there, and it's more of a call from the other side. I mean, the employee at times has a call in terms of whether I will go in or not. And if you're bringing in a manufacturing end in a certain country, which is more of a best cost country, then obviously we need to look at what are the trade-offs which we need to have. Obviously, core and flex benefits is something which will come into the picture, and also the level of house, I mean, as in the accommodation which we're giving, the flexibility in terms of how close or far the accommodation would be, or the vendor benefits itself is something which we'll try to leverage as well.
Good. So while I know some of you have a kind of standard benefit for all, but isn't it the kind of challenge to kind of meet the aspirations of the leadership folks who would probably want to expect more or contribute more to the organization? Then how do you really manage that kind of expectations versus kind of being a standard flat structure? Wouldn't that throw up more challenges to the organization in terms of retaining their tenured as well as leadership level of people? Then how do you address that? You can go ahead, Ravi. Maybe.
I think in terms of how mobility benefits are planned, it is planned more in terms of if a person is moving, let's say on this type of an assignment, what are the things that we need to make available for this move to be successful? That's how you start thinking about putting together a set of benefits. And then comes the cross-section of the employees in terms of, okay, this kind of an employee lot is having this sort of an expectation versus, let's say, somebody more senior or in their late careers are having a different set of expectations. It is about starting off with something that fits all in terms of being able to support them and make a move successful, and then the customization, the tailoring, and all of that comes in. So as the mobility function grows in an organization, for some of these companies that are here, I think mobility has been a part of their DNA for a very long time. So they're already at a stage where they're like, okay, I know what my cross sections are, and these are the specific needs of these sections, and okay, now I start tailoring it.
Got it.
For a lot of organizations that start off in their mobility journey early on, you'd see a lot more flat, straight structure, or companies that believe in non-red carpetism, having a very flat structure. You would still see the element of exceptions, where you need to make things available to a certain section or certain folks to make that assignment successful. At the end of the day, the bottom line is what does the organization have to do to make some move successful? So that's how I see it.
See, what is important to me may not be important to other person. So exceptions are part of global mobility. Day in, day out, every other move, you will definitely see some exceptions. So how much are you wanting to do? So need versus want is the balance that you need to strike. So want is always more than the need, right? So as long as you know the finishing line and where you're actually ending, it's good. So just to quote, there are situations where we just say 90 days of temporary accommodation or 30 days of temporary accommodation. There are still people who will come and say, like, you give me the cash for 90 days, I will use it for 120 days. No, either you take it or lose it. So that's exactly where you just draw that line. Yes, there are exceptions, and how we deal with it and how much you set the expectations, like Ravi quoted, how much you set the expectations right at the beginning. And the intent of global mobility today for a company is to make them settle down very well and allow them to achieve what they're expected to achieve. It's not about making the most out of any program. So we ensure that they are either not worse off or better off. So that's the target.
Absolutely. I think it's an important point that you brought in. whether, how do we really balance the need versus want or the bare minimum that we need to do? And how do we really draw a line there to kind of differentiate what's too much, what's minimum, what's balanced kind of?
It's also about the ROI onto the investment which they are making. So obviously, when it comes to technical expertise and somebody getting onto a COE, I mean, there was a debate recently on why does a CEO get 400 times the salary of a technician? I mean, obviously they have something to do at that level. That's why they're getting paid. So this goes similar there to a large extent. While we have the core benefits and the per diems, the allowances on to a certain extent, we need to look at what we're getting out of these people moving into a different location. Then obviously it's part of the negotiation to look at the exceptions and ensure that it is not too many exceptions, which is getting into administration would be too difficult there. And it's, at the end of the day, their managers needs to agree on the cost which is going into it.
Correct. You need to have some kind of parity as well, right? You can't have too many exceptions, everything. Okay. Any other thoughts from Ravi or Lakshmi on this? No. Okay, good. So other thing I want to check is, of late, like I've been seeing that request to work abroad or a remote work policy is kind of increasing the demand. How do you guys see in your organization? Is there a increased trend or requirement for this, or is there a probably it's going down now, or is it still tick to post-COVID scenario?
I mean, as Ravi was mentioning, it's going more, but people are now getting back to work. That is also something which is coming in. But there are cases where we are getting people from different locations and where we don't have the offices. That could come to the P risk, but they want to go back home and they might work in those locations. So if we don't get the remote policy in place, they would look at different ways of maneuvering through the situation. So we need to look at how we can organize it in such a way that corporate tax is mitigated, issues are mitigated there, and also it's a benefit which we need to be carefully managing with a policy which can help both sides.
So do you have a dedicated policy, or are you taking this an ad hoc request?
We've said no to the remote work policy at this point of time.
Okay.
But exceptions do arise, then we look at what could be the best solution which we can align through it.
Got it. I think Lakshmi might have a different answer.
Yes, so this is a popular framework for Standard Chartered, Rajesh. So request to work abroad and virtual assignments, let's not, let's clearly understand the differentiation between a virtual assignment and request to work abroad. So virtual assignment is allowing someone to sit in the home country or a third country to perform the role of a host country. But request to work abroad is completely treated as for personal reasons, right? Yeah. So when you know it is for personal reasons, you clearly have to understand the line, and you cannot step out of that. So we have a dedicated policy and framework that is drawn, and I can say that we have grown 50 times, okay, in the last 3 years. So this population is more, and we have lots and lots of challenges that you're fighting. And one thing that we have clearly started off with it is, there is no target population like assignment population, right? So anybody could have a request to work abroad for personal reasons. So unless you are a returning national or you have right to work, you cannot be in that particular country. You cannot just go on a visit visa, sit in a country and perform the role. You're unnecessarily putting bank to risk. And it is not about personal taxes. You may say, like, I will go to Canada. I am willing to pick up the taxes that I have to pay or report. It's not about your taxes, my dear. It's about putting your organization to risk. So that's the understanding. So we have done a framework. We are passing out on communications. We are doing trainings across the board. So we're making everyone responsible and liable. Every other employee has to clearly understand what it means for the employee and for the bank. So there are, yes, challenges, but we are working very closely, and we have come up with some technology and some tools as well for this.
To kind of, so you have basically saying you have a technology kind of manage this kind of remote.
This is one as good as as important as a LTA or STA for us. So we call it as a RTWA. And we have a proper tool, we have technology, we have vendors to monitor, and we have done all integrations as well. Yes.
Okay. Ravi, any thoughts on this? Request to work abroad?
I think I touched upon it earlier. We do have a policy around permanent international remote work, which allows us to hire folks in locations different from where the role is based out of.
But is that based on their personal aspiration or is it most on the business need?
Yeah, so the policy actually accounts for both. It accounts for the business need to be able to hire elsewhere. It also accounts for these unique personal situations that we want to cater to. So how we basically filter further is by seeing how critical the role is, how critical the skill is, or how critical the employee is when it comes to personal requests of how much risk the company wants to take in those situations. The framework is nothing new. This is what you would have done if you did not have a framework as well. All the checks that you would have done to make it happen. What the framework allows us to do is have a systematic way of going about it in each request. So we first think whether is it company requested or is it employee requested. If it's employee requested, there are particular set of things that we want to ensure are okay before we make it, let's say, possible. And if it's a company requested one, then we start to probably look at it a little more like an assignment. Think, okay, this is a company's need, how do we make it happen? So all of that is built into the framework. It allows us to think in a structured way because these requests could be for any reason and it's very hard to say yes to one and no to another. The broader aspects of equity, consistency, all of that need to be accounted for and the framework basically allows you to do that. The other two pieces, if I may just take another 30 seconds, are besides permanent remote work, the need for people to travel, let's say, for a month on a vacation and then probably work during that time. So something we term as a short-term remote work or personal situations that require you to be in another country for an extended period, which we term as an extended short-term remote work. These are a lot more harder to design a framework around. And this is something that we've also been grappling for almost a year and a half, 2 years now, trying to put a framework around the other two aspects of international remote work. So we look at it as three different segments, and we have something that caters to one. The other two are work in progress to answer your question.
So if I had to summarize, basically you're saying your policy is quite flexible and then you basically look into this based on need basis rather than calling it out as a separate policy as such.
More than flexibility, I would say it is the nuance of each one of those. Although all of them, if you can bucket under remote work, are remote work. But if you look at the time period for which it's being requested, it brings about different sets of challenges for the organization. And therefore a need for a dedicated framework to manage them.
Okay, great. So any other organization here has this dedicated policy for, like, say, request to work abroad, maybe different terminology, but the concept same. Okay, I see 2, 3, okay, 4 hands, 5. Good, okay. I think very few, yeah, so limited, great. I think we are still okay on time. Just one last question. Okay, I'll probably pick up this one before moving to the Q&A. I think we didn't have much Q&A. Let's give it an opportunity for the participants here. Do you have the rest and recuperate policy? I think this is something that's come up recently. I don't know, again, how many organizations has this, but I'd like to view your thoughts. Who wants to go first? Lakshmi, maybe? Yeah.
Given I come from shipping industry and there is a lot of hardship locations we need to deal with, I'll go first. So it's I think a lot to do with the industry that you operate in as well. Of course, there is a need for rest and recuperation, every kind of business that you can imagine. But when you put into perspective things like oil rigs where people are working from away from land for a long time, you talk about shipping terminals that are based in very high risk locations, rest and recuperation becomes a very important part of the overall policy. Now, there are folks who are on assignment to those locations, and there are folks that are from those locations that work there. It is equally relevant to both. I'll just stick to the ones that are around the mobility piece, which is for the expats living in those locations, because there is the cultural element, the fact that they are strangers to the land, the fact that they're battling so many other things besides this, makes it very important for companies like ours to have a very strong rest and recuperation. Now, there were times when rest and recuperation was more a line item in the many benefits as another cash that's handed out or another option for you to book tickets. I think Maersk at least is looking at it a lot more closely in terms of how do we make this a part of the culture, the mobile population culture, saying, hey, if you're living in one of these hardship locations, we insist you do certain things, right? We insist you make this happen. So probably moving away from cash options to benefits that are actually, let's say, doable, or we make them happen, is what we're looking at, from a traditional cash alternative to, let's say, tickets to travel back to your family or with your family to another location and things like that.
Great.
We call it as R&R. Okay, yes, it is one of the policy that we offer for long-term assignees. And this is not for short-term assignees, because short-term assignees, they're expected to come back to the home location anytime. So long-term assignees, we do not define the markets just like that, like say Nigeria or Kenya or Pakistan, Syria. So wherever you're operational, it depends on the country combination. So for example, if I am into Pakistan, and if I'm moving from say India to Pakistan, there is an index, right? Which we call it as a TP, Territorial Premium Index. So this index is completely dependent on your lifestyle in your home country and your lifestyle in the destination country. So in case if I move from say Pakistan to Syria, the TP may not work. The hardship may not come into place. But if I'm from India to Pakistan, so it's dependent on the country combinations. So the way we operate, like Ravi rightly said, it's not a cash benefit that we provide. We rather provide, for example, if the index says 25% or a 30% above, there is an amount that we settle them. Apart from that, we give them 5 days of holidays where they could just travel to a nearby location. Of course, one wouldn't want to travel to a nearby location, say Dubai or any other country. They would prefer to move back to home country to visit their parents or family. So that is something that we we insist people taking that because of the hardship, whatever that they experience in Saudi or Pakistan or Syria, or, some of the markets. So this is popular in African markets.
Okay, interesting. So you're saying this is more for employees work in African market, not less.
Depending on their home countries, so how the country combination. So if you're within Africa, so if I'm moving, say, into Saudi, within Middle East, within Gulf, it doesn't come into place. Instead, if I move from, say, India to Saudi, and if the TP index says it's more than 30% or 40%, depending on the economical, geopolitical, social, or various hardship reasons, if the index says so, then this is provided. Again, this is for long-term assignees, and there is no trade-off, and there is no way where business can say, like, you don't have to provide. These are some of the mandate benefits that we provide for people moving into hardship locations.
Sachin, any thoughts from your side?
I mean, we don't have too many long-term assignments, so this is not part of it, but obviously they get a home leave. In general, what we've seen is mental health is becoming something where it is critical, and obviously this is one part of an allowance or a criteria or a provision which would be utilized in case of global mobility policies as well. And predominantly what I've seen in different sectors is they get to give either a home leave or a rest and recreation. So they can opt between these two. That is one thing which we have seen predominantly there.
Okay, I think that's wonderful. So I would want to have Q&A with the audience. I think we just have 4 minutes left. Any questions at the audience level? Can we have the mic passed, please?
Hi guys, Emmanuel this side. Lovely panel. Thanks, Rajesh. While all of us spoke about like remote working policies, and when you asked people to raise hands, there were only 4 hands up, right? So how crucial do you think to have a remote work policy in any organization, especially for startups? Lakshmi, this is for you.
For startups?
Yes.
I think startups, do they really focus on, I think it's, let's say technology and banking, right? So when I used to work for Microsoft or other companies, we never had any restriction in picking our laptop and moving to another location and just working from there. So I don't know how, if other Infi and my Wipro friends, if they have any such requirements today. But I think startups, if you are willing to take that risk of tax and compliance, and if you're willing to face those experts, it's up to them. But I think it is very, very important that we bring in a policy in place, especially after COVID, it is very important for us to have a framework for request to work abroad. Like Ravi said, in his company, they don't treat it as for personal reasons, but in bank, we treat it as for personal reasons. So we clearly differentiate. Like if you want to go to, say, Sydney on a personal travel, is this a business driven or employee driven? If it is a business driven, then you fall here. Is it an employee driven, you fall here, right? So I think it is important to have a framework, at least call out the challenges and don't stand and then tomorrow if there is a COVID or any other pandemic, we will then be wanting to understand what are the other challenges that we might face. So I think it's important you have a framework and be ready for things. And then it's up to the bank or the organization whether they want to follow it up or not, depending on the volumes, etc.
Thank you.
Can I just add another 15 seconds to that? Startup or otherwise, I think understanding the risks that come with remote work is necessary for any business. If it's a smaller organization, you may not have the might to put together a policy and administer it. You at least have a framework that tells you what to do in these situations. For any organization that can afford to have a framework around it, it is good to have because these requests don't come warned. And once you have a framework, you're able to use them beyond just one-off instances. So that's the limited answer.
Yeah, my question is to you, Ravi. So you mentioned you have short-term remote workers. So what is the maximum duration that you guys allow the travelers?
I mentioned we are working on short-term remote workers and extended short-term, but to answer your question, the safe number that we've landed at so far is 20 days,
Okay.
which in most cases is sufficient when it is leisure plus some amount of limited work from, let's say, somebody's home country. But that's as far as we've gone.
So when you say it's 20 days, how is the PE risk handled?
It's not something that we've really got our hands around.
Okay.
So that is something that's still open. Again, the one benefit that we have here is it's limited to folks who are going back to work in their home country. We look at roles, we look at what kind of jobs or profiles they're into before we approve requests. Since there is no policy, there's still an approval matrix that people have to go through. And one of the things that we check is the role and what kind of risks those roles carry. When we see something that's not very risky, again, it's very risky to say this in a large audience, but when we see roles that are not very risky or are not customer facing and the typical, we're kind of okay for them to work out of their home countries for a couple of days in between their vacation. And all that we tell them is keep it limited to, let's say, the urgent stuff, responding to basic stuff.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
keep it as generic as I can.
So one thing just to add, yes, in some organizations they have, like Ravi said, 20 days. I think what we can also think through in some of the companies that have worked, look for the threshold. Like say, for example, if I'm moving from, say, India to Singapore, the threshold, I think 50 or 60 days is where I can actually sit in a country. Otherwise, beyond 60 days, whether I travel throughout or cumulative in a year, if I've traveled, say, 61 days or 62 days, I'm supposed to report the income that I earn in India to IRAs in Singapore. So it's very important that you understand the threshold period for each country. So where your presence is more, where your company, where your markets, which of the markets your footfall is high. So look for the markets and then look for the tax threshold, and then maybe you can work with your tax experts to understand, is it okay, is it safe, should I be reporting the income, who will report this income, so what is that income. So I think that is something which you can actually check through.
Yeah, we have where we allow only maximum 10 days. And each case goes to the tax manager and gets a clearance.
Right.
So when Ravi mentioned it, I was curious to know how many days they allow. Thank you. Yeah.
Extremely case by case, I would call it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Lakshmi, my question is to you. You just said that you track your remote workers and you have tools for the same. So within these tools, is the onus on the employees to declare their locations, or are there other methodologies that you follow?
Very, very good question. And we were tracking manually. So we started off with just 100 and we are 50 times more today. So it is very difficult for us to track. And the intent, this is completely for personal reasons. It's not business driven. So it is definitely on the onus of employee. And I would continue to have this the same way, because it is for their purpose that they are actually declaring. And tomorrow, I don't want to go and mitigate. You told me that you're here for your sickness or whatever reason, but you're here roaming around. I cannot be held responsible, and I cannot be answering the embassies and immigration authorities. So it is definitely for personal reasons, and the employee literally signs, I hereby declare so, and then that's when the case request even comes to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We are run out of trouble, time. If you still have any questions, they're here. You can capture them at the coffee break. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful session.
Thank you.